The mirage of the milestone. Let me ask you something before we dive into anything else tonight, Leo. Are you truly happy? That's a tough way to start. Honestly, I don't know. I'm rarely as content as I thought I'd be by this stage in my life. I always find myself assuming that genuine satisfaction is waiting just around the corner, right after the next major milestone. But the goalposts just keep shifting. It never stays in one place. With those few words, you've perfectly captured the core realization of one of history's most uncompromising thinkers. The peace you are pursuing keeps moving, because it was never stationary to begin with. It isn't waiting for you in the future. It never was. Nearly 2 centuries ago, a philosopher named Arthur Schopenhauer had the rare bravery to state this reality plainly. The paradox of the pessimist. Schopenhauer, the notorious pessimist? How can someone with such a bleak view of existence teach anyone a lesson about finding contentment? That is the exact contradiction we are exploring tonight, Leo. Born in Danzig in 1788 and passing away in Frankfurt in 1860, Schopenhauer constructed what is arguably the most sobering analysis of human satisfaction ever written. Yet those who truly study his work notice a bizarre effect. They walk away feeling lighter and more at peace, as if a massive burden has been lifted. He doesn't strip away your joy. He strips away the agonizing, false illusions of joy that society feeds you. What remains when those illusions shatter is the only true tranquility a conscious mind can experience, redefining the pursuit. So, is your goal tonight simply to convince me that satisfaction is an illusion and doesn't exist? No, it's more nuanced than that. I want to show you what fulfillment actually looks like, which is entirely different from the grand promises you've been sold. Be warned, the initial concepts will feel like a profound loss, and you'll want to push back. Go ahead and argue. Your doubts are entirely natural. But if you stick with it until the end, you'll find that the final insights open a door to genuine clarity. These are 9 stark truths regarding why the pursuit fails, and what is left behind once you abandon the chase. Lesson 1. Fulfillment is merely negative. Let's begin with the baseline truth that underpins everything else. Positive happiness is an illusion. What we commonly call joy is actually just the brief, temporary intermission of pain. I have to stop you there. When I experience joy, it feels like a tangible, active presence, not just a blank canvas where suffering used to be. Delight is real. It has weight. Schopenhauer asks you to dissect those moments more closely. Think of what triggers that feeling. A heavy meal when you are starved, resting an exhausted body, a clean bill of health after a terrifying medical scare, or paying off a stressful debt. In every scenario, the pleasure stems entirely from the eradication of a negative state: hunger, fatigue, fear, or lack. The relief isn't an addition to your life, it's a subtraction of pressure. The illusion of material stockpiling. What about the pure delight that doesn't rely on prior agony, like a beautiful morning, listening to great music, or sharing a genuine laugh with close friends? Schopenhauer anticipated that exact counter-argument. He would argue that even a gorgeous morning is only appreciated because it stands in stark contrast to the routine dullness of daily confinement. Music brings joy because it temporarily silences the loud, demanding voice of your desires. Laughter with friends briefly lowers the heavy armor of navigating the world as an isolated individual. True pleasure is always a negative reaction, the quiet settling of a disturbance. Pain is the active, positive force that demands your attention. Pleasure is merely its departure, collapsing the consumer strategy. Why does it matter whether we define it as a presence or an absence, though? As long as the sensation feels good, the underlying mechanics shouldn't change anything. It changes absolutely everything, Leo. If satisfaction were a tangible substance, then the standard modern strategy makes perfect sense. Chase more possessions, stack up achievements, collect premium experiences, and your joy will grow exponentially. That is the foundational myth of our civilization. But if it is actually just the temporary absence of distress, that entire consumer strategy falls apart. You cannot hoard an absence. You cannot pile up relief. The moment you satisfy one desire, A fresh vulnerability or craving takes its place, causing the illusion to evaporate. The chase fails because the target isn't real. Lesson 2. The pendulum of existence. This brings us to the second insight. Human life continuously swings back and forth like a pendulum between acute pain and stagnant boredom. What we call satisfaction is just the fleeting moment where the pendulum passes through the center. The pendulum metaphor is famous, but break down how it actually dictates our daily behavior. It is the most accurate map of human psychology ever drawn. When you lack a vital resource, whether it's money, companionship, or validation, you suffer intensely from that void. That is the pain side of the arc. Driven by that torment, you strive and sacrifice until you finally secure what you wanted. You experience a brief window of relief, but very quickly that hard-won prize becomes ordinary, expected, and invisible. Contentment doesn't arrive. Instead, a hollow restlessness takes over. That is boredom, an enemy so agonizing that people will actively seek out drama or suffering just to feel something. Stepping off the arc. So we are caught in a trap? We suffer when we are searching and we grow numb once we succeed? Is there no permanent resting place? Not along the arc of the pendulum itself. This explains the profound melancholy that frequently settles in right after you achieve a lifelong dream. The issue was never the specific goal you chose. It is the fundamental structure of desire itself. However, Schopenhauer noted that there are unique states of consciousness that exist entirely off this grid, because they are free from desire. When you engage in deep creative expression, when you lose yourself in art, or when you extend genuine selfless compassion to another person, the demanding ego falls silent. The pendulum stops swinging because the engine of wanting has temporarily shut down. Lesson 3. The myth of the horizon. The third reality is that the idealized future you are waiting for will never arrive in the form you imagine, because arrival is a concept the future cannot fulfill. That strikes a chord. I've spent my entire life telling myself, once I finish this project, then I can finally relax and be content. Practically everyone falls victim to that internal script. We treat our actual lives as a temporary hallway, a mere waiting room to endure until we reach the real destination. But look at what happens when the milestone lands. You graduate, get the promotion, or secure the relationship. The novelty quickly fades into a baseline normal, a new deficiency arises, and the mind subtly updates the terms of the contract. You spend decades living provisionally, always preparing to live, but dying before you ever truly begin. Escaping the waiting room. It's a quiet tragedy to realize you've spent your whole life just waiting around for a starting whistle that never blows. It's the most common tragedy because it masquerades as practical planning. No individual day spent preparing feels like a mistake. But when you chain 40 years of those provisional days together, you look back and realize the joy you were postponing was only ever available in the ordinary moments you rushed through. It was in the health you took for granted, the people who are no longer here, and the unhurried time you dismissed as empty. The present moment is the only reality that exists. You can plan for tomorrow, but you must occupy today. There is no hidden secondary life waiting to start later. This current one is it. Lesson 4. The industrialization of envy. The fourth truth states that comparison is the ultimate assassin of internal peace, and modern society has essentially industrialized this flaw through technology. Are we talking about the psychological toll of social media feeds? It goes much deeper than the apps themselves, though they have turned an ancient human weakness into a constant drip feed. Schopenhauer observed long ago that human misery rarely stems from actual deprivation. It stems from witnessing the abundance of others. A person is perfectly happy with their circumstances until they see someone who has more. Comparison manufactures a sense of lack that didn't exist a moment prior. Worse, the equation is completely rigged. You are comparing the messy, anxious, unedited reality of your internal life against the carefully curated, polished exterior performance of someone else's. Directing the gaze. So how do we counteract an impulse that seems hardwired into our brains, especially when we are surrounded by other people? You must fiercely guard the perimeter of your attention, because whatever you look at dictates your internal reference points. If you measure your life against the top fraction of a percent of the global population's best moments, your daily existence will always feel like a failure. Schopenhauer suggests a practical recentering. If your mind insists on comparing, intentionally look toward those who are enduring far worse hardships. Shifting the direction of your gaze transforms an impulse that breeds bitter resentment into an appreciation for the suffering you have been spared. Lesson 5. The value of the lens. Fifth, what a person is fundamentally dictates their quality of life far more than what they have or what they represent to the public. Yet almost everyone pours their energy into the wrong categories. People pay lip service to that idea all the time, but their actual behavior completely contradicts it. Exactly. Schopenhauer breaks life into 3 accounts: material possessions, public reputation, and internal character, your health, temperament, and intellect. Everything you experience in the outer world must first pass through the filter of your internal self. An anxious, chaotic mind will find reasons to be miserable even in a palace, while a rich, cultivated consciousness can find profound depth in a simple room. Your character is the lens of your existence. If the lens is cracked, no amount of wealth can fix the view. Guard your health and cultivate your mind. It is the only possession that external fortune cannot strip away in an instant. Lesson 6. Burning the brochure. Our 6th insight is that a massive portion of human unhappiness is generated not by reality itself, but by our unrealistic expectations of it. If you lower your expectations, a significant amount of your suffering immediately evaporates. Doesn't that philosophy sound a bit like defeatism? It feels like settling for a lesser life out of fear. To a young mind, it sounds like surrender, but it is actually a precise calculation of peace. Disappointment requires a gap between expectation and reality. A modest outcome feels like a tragedy to someone who expected absolute perfection, but feels like an unexpected bonus to someone who anticipated nothing. We don't suffer from our actual lives. We suffer from the imaginary, idealized life we believe we were owed. You were handed a glossy marketing brochure for an easy, flawless existence during childhood. Burn the brochure. When you expect life to be difficult, smooth days feel like a profound gift. Lesson 7. The invisible asset. 7th, physical health accounts for 90% of our potential well-being, yet it remains the one asset we possess in abundance without ever consciously acknowledging it. People with great health still find ways to be incredibly miserable every day, though. Misusing an asset doesn't diminish its value. Ask anyone enduring severe chronic pain what they would trade to have just one completely painless day, and their answer is always the same. They would give up their money, their status, and their achievements in a heartbeat. Right now, your body is executing millions of complex biological functions perfectly without your intervention. Because it doesn't hurt, you register this baseline state as a 0. It is a massive accounting error. We treat health as invisible while we have it, and only appreciate it when it's gone. Never trade your physical or mental well-being for external status. Lesson 8. Dismantling the human engine. The 8th lesson is a warning. No other human being can serve as the engine of your personal fulfillment, and demanding that role from them will inevitably destroy the relationship. This ties back to the idea that we often look to external romance to patch over internal deficits. Precisely. The most common relationship strategy is an exercise in outsourcing. We expect a partner, a child, or a friend to eliminate our internal emptiness and validate our worth. In doing so, you place the control panel of your emotional stability inside someone else's hands, while simultaneously crushing them under the weight of an impossible expectation. No one can manufacture lasting internal peace for another person. When they inevitably fail to deliver it, we blame them. True connection only becomes possible when you build your own internal baseline, allowing others to be your companions rather than your structural support. Lesson 9. The arrival of serenity. This brings us to the final 9th reality. When you completely stop sprinting after an imaginary version of happiness, A profound, quiet serenity arrives to take its place. After systematically tearing down every traditional source of joy for 8 lessons, it's surprising to hear that there is a positive destination at the end of this road. Despair only happens when the frantic chase fails, but you keep trying to run anyway. When you finally accept that the idealized prey you were hunting doesn't exist, the running stops. In that sudden stillness, a state of deep release settles over you. You stop demanding that life provide something it never possessed, which finally allows you to appreciate what it actually offers. An unhurried evening, a fascinating book, a deep conversation, or a walk in the open air. The chase was the very thing blinding you to the room you were already standing in, the ultimate liberation. So Schopenhauer's philosophy isn't meant to isolate us. It's meant to break the spell of an exhausting illusion. That is the ultimate twist of his work. The thinker labeled as history's deepest pessimist is actually offering a profound form of liberation. He completely dismantles the artificial mirages and consumer promises that drain your daily energy. Once you stop running toward a horizon that keeps receding, you drop your anchor in reality. You trade a lifetime of chasing a fantasy for the quiet, genuine sufficiency of the present day. It is the single most valuable trade a human being can ever make. It allows you to finally see the quiet beauty of the life that was already yours.